yoga and make sure we maximize our effort there. You know, if the girl can do it, I don't know where her pathway is. You know, especially now she's going to travel as well. And a lot of it also seems to be Rigo says the person she's assigned to help LA County is very good. He asked me if I knew and I thought it is, but I never. He says, oh, she works with Jacob. So usually she hires people to help, you know, roll these pilots out or roll these efforts out. So, which is great.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm thinking, well, why don't we just use her to do a couple more weekends elsewhere?
Elsewhere, yeah.
And so, and get that funded first. And fund the CBOs to participate. You know, that's fine. You know, and then we'll worry about. By then we'll have, because next week we'll see the new high.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes out. So we'll have at least we'll know where the governor's coming from, and then the Senate and the Assembly will get serious. You know, because once they see that number, that's it. You know, and then they've got a month. And so one thing I don't know if you've heard me, I was talking to you about the on the roundtable discussion is IGR said that the legislature has a very hard date on the 25th of May because you know we're doing that get together on the 23rd. And that's why I was asking, is it staff coming or is it actually the assembly, you know, Senate members? Because they have to be there on Sunday if they, not Sunday, on the 25th, because that's the last day to get their bills. The bills either are in or out at that point. And so I said, wow, I hope they'll.
And no, I think we're reaching out to staff.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I think at some point, you know, it would be good to bring them in, but I think they're going to be jammed trying to get their bills through on the 25th. So anyway, so IGR was Katrina. If they do come, kind of just one-off, you know, because they got to be they're going to want to be in Sacramento and make sure they get heard. Well, yeah. I mean, for that. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, so what I wanted to point out on the John Dobar, the list that I did of what he can cover. Now he's adding a couple of people, looking at more areas for the Valley City, but he's only had about technically correct.
Countywide.
And he didn't have great coverage.
Yeah, he does.
And so, which kind of surprised me. Yes.
There's some that are really high.
Plus, just the city has a lot of areas that even if they're not red or yeah, like even West Hollywood, which isn't really a red orange area, that has been lots of apartments. Yeah. So, I am kind of concerned. And then, of course, I gave him the state unincorporated areas he doesn't even know that he can get. And I was kind of surprised only because some of them are right adjacent to a city area. So I'm thinking, well, if he doesn't pick up those two areas, then we need to start talking to somebody, you know, whether it's higher or the schools in the area or the unions, yeah. So, and that's what, and I also don't want delivering. I didn't want to put that in the don't overpromise and underdeliver.
Lucio and I had a great meeting with U.S. federal HUD. Yeah. So it was HUD and it was the person who's running our LA Promise Zone program. And so they have a coalition of about 6 organizations in Los Angeles in the Promise Zone, which are all our hard to count areas. Not all, but like that's majority. That are working on the LA Promise Zone plan. But they were very excited to incorporate census work as part of what they're doing for programming and providing services in those neighborhoods. So for us, I think I'm hopeful that like whatever the CBOs John's group can't cover, that we can then bring in the LA Promise Zone with their 76 organizations and say, okay, now for those areas that they're not covering, you do on your own.
Right, and that's what, you know, so I don't so much want John to feel he has to do it. I want him to realize this is the path he has.
Right.
So I don't want to give them the impression that it's gotta be him.
I was like, I don't want to do it.
I just want to know what is him, and that's because of the detail. When we utilize the CBOs, well, if they can only cover 40 to 45%, that's great, and we can fund that level, but we're not going to give them 100% of funding for 44%.
Right.
Yeah, so because then I'd rather hold back the money for the unions or for whoever else is going to need it, other CBOs, faith-based organizations, something that they don't have as much strength. Maybe it is the Orange County Partners for that, right? Church, some of the others, and that's fine. You can contribute, to our income fund, if they can pull together volunteers. So I don't want him to feel like that is neck shoulder very tight for him. And I think in 2010 they did because that was all they had.
Right.
But I don't think it has to necessarily be that way this go around because we're planning everything to be out.
I was gonna say,
It's not
We
help
bring
out. But that's why I think that was kind of helpful so we can start seeing more stuff covered.
Did you get them yesterday?
And I asked him to add it to the agenda.
Which conference?
But I think that's the whole focus of it. It needs to be like open now.
Right. Well, it's that marrying of your strategy to do target population and identifying geographies.
Right.
Like you need to marry those two strategies together and come up with an actual plan that says, okay, geographically, that means we're covering these areas. Population-wise, we're going to be covering these areas that, or these populations, sorry, not populations. But, that equates to what, 500,000 people?
Right.
That'll equate to 20,000 people.
Right. Because even within those communities, what is there? Once you identify the area, it's still, you're going to really do all East LA and Boyle Heights? Okay, that's a pretty big chunk right there. Not to mention our Florence Firestone, which is adjacent to your Florence Firestone. I mean, those are pretty massive areas, right? Just covering those pieces. So ability to do that. So
Show up, or maybe not show up, but convert it to like the big county map, and we put little flags, right, with the overlay of the census block groups. So she said, okay, flag, flag where.
then the CBS can actually really tell us their boundaries.
Yeah, and then we can then just upload that work onto the LRS.
Right.
And then, give that to DWS.
Right.
Let DWS.
She'll put it into the sword.
I mean, that might be a really interesting exercise to engage in with them.
Yeah, I think we need to do something very hands-on with him because he's still so theoretical, which is fine, but we've got to start getting him to narrow down a little bit. Because before we know it, it'll be the end of 2018 and we're still saying planning. Which we can. I mean, there can be some planning going on at the end of 2018 as well, but we want to start really shaping it by then, and knowing who we're calling on and making certain they're trained, because they all have to be trained in how they use it. And material starts getting, because it takes a while to get some of those contracts and relations to get materials from them.
Exactly.
And just the translation of them, into other languages. So, because we've identified, it's really weird, that over here, well, our healthy human services experience and social services is really high, and the registrar together, they actually don't identify as most, and so I'm kind of looking at the mental health list for both the day services. Because some of it is different dialects of it, like the Chinese. They'll just say Chinese, but they want Mandarin, and then they call it basic or something. There's like some sort of simple, yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm totally, so like when I was with the city clerk's office in Los Angeles, I oversaw their outreach and education programs, and part of what we did was we
was a, I said, yeah, as soon as they get off script, you're like a little lost. It's like, I guess somebody writes out a certain amount for them, but then when the questions are coming. So,
American Touch only the talking points that we
I
provided.
noticed, but you know what? I think we were talking to somebody about it, and she mentioned the 3.5 notes. She was using your numbers. I was like, oh, okay, well, somebody's going to use them,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because they never gave me an exam like they were going to write.
Right.
So I had sent them yours
Yeah.
because I never knew what they were going to use. And they said, and then all of a sudden I heard her say, and you tell me Los Angeles is 3.5 million immigrants. I go, well, she didn't get that from me. That was right off.
I know, so I was just like,
So I thought, yeah, there's going to be a lot of that where we're going to put together stuff and they get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, the mayor's
Yeah.
son was on the
Bill
Bill
Maher,
Maher shirt that later that day.
I couldn't believe it. I know. I turn on Bill Maher and they go, and you know, Mayor Tubbs, Mayor Tubbs. That's probably why he was down here because I kept trying to figure out why is he there, and because he's not even Southern California, really,
I know,
right?
he's Southern
So,
Sacramento County.
yeah. So it was so funny. So he has some really interesting programs
I
going on in his city,
know,
and I
yeah.
mean, he looked young, but I didn't realize how young he is. You know.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's
actually listening to him speak in that venue, he's more comfortable. You know, you really could appreciate him more than the standard census stuff, which I'm sure he's concerned about. But and sounds like he knows the city's there. You know, the city didn't it almost go bankrupt at one point? You know, so he's really being that progressive. It's very interesting.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. How are you today? Good morning. Thanks for coming on a Sunday morning. We're just waiting for a few more people to make their way inside, and we will kick it off. Welcome. Great. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and for anyone who's on our live feed, we thank you for joining us today. We're very excited to kick off Digital Inclusion Week with a special hackathon focused on the 2020 census. So we're all happy that you're here and hope that you've come with some great ideas and are excited about learning about this challenge. We're here at the Central Library in the city of Los Angeles, and very happy to work with the library as well as the mayor's office and LA County around the census and looking at 2020 and how we make sure everyone is encouraged to participate and be counted in our county. So I'm Dawn Comer. I didn't tell you who I was. I'm Dawn Comer, and I work with the information technology for the city of LA. And so we're happy to partner on this event today. And right now I'll hand it over to Edwin Rodarte from the library, who will let us know what we have planned for the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. My name is Edwin Rodarte. I am the Senior Librarian for Emerging Technologies Department here at the Los Angeles Public Library. So welcome everybody that came. So that's awesome, and those are joining us virtually as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the rest of the day, how it's going to look. So just so you guys know, if you grab one of the agendas at the beginning of the registration table, you'll know that we have the registration already happened. We have right now the welcoming. So after this, there'll be a presentation done by the LA County and the mayor, person from the census, doing the presentation about this specific topic. After the presentations, you guys will split out into groups. If you see into your program, you'll see the map. There's kind of designated areas that you can go to. The closest one is just across the hallway into the New American Center, but there's also meeting rooms A and Bs. So then you'll just choose, you can congregate, you can even work outside where the tables are set up for with the breakfast area. It's dependent on you guys what you prefer. You'll form teams, and then from there you'll kind of work on a product together. We'll congregate back here for breakfast, for lunch, I'm sorry, around 12 o'clock. That's when you'll have your lunch, and then afterwards you'll split up again into your groups. We'll have the presentations at 4:30, so we'll expect everybody to have kind of like a finalized product by 4:15 p.m. so that you're ready to kind of present your idea to the team or the judging panel. After that, and make sure that if you're not already in Slack, that you're using it. That's our communication channel for those that are also joining us virtually, so that if you don't have a complete team, maybe somebody can join you virtually as well, and you can work collaboratively that way. We'll announce the winners around after the presentations are done, and we have a little time to do the judging criteria. We do have some awesome prizes, and if you signed in this morning as well, we're raffling off an iPad and another kind of like a goodie bag from LAPL. In your packet, you'll see that we have a Wi-Fi set up for these events, so make sure that if you're connected to the Wi-Fi, on the page where the map is the LAPL census Wi-Fi, and then the password is provided as well. So with that being said, this is part of Digital Inclusion Week. We're having a series of programs throughout this whole week, kind of like highlighting the need for programs and kind of like the work that the library does around digital inclusion. So if you're interested, I put out some flyers for our next program, which is this Wednesday night at 6 p.m., and it's on reducing digital disparities and building tech inclusion. We're having some amazing panelists coming in and talking about the digital divide in Los Angeles County, what that looks like, and what are some things that we can do to bridge it. So I'll turn it over to Maria and Dorothea so that they can talk about the census. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Maria de la Luz Garcia, and I'm the Director of Census with the Office of Mayor Eric Garcetti. Thank you so much for being here with us today, especially because it's a holiday weekend and it's a Sunday. So we're especially appreciative of all of you who are joining us in person and virtually to talk about such an important topic that's going to impact our community in Los Angeles, here in the city and countywide. The census is a fundamental aspect of our democracy. It really kicks off a series of processes in our country that depend on everything from registering to vote, voting, the political representation that we get in our communities, and the federal funds that we receive in order for us as government agencies to provide social services to our residents. And so we're really appreciative of you being here today to engage in a creative process to help us better prepare for the census by thinking creatively in terms of finding solutions to some of the challenges that we're going to be facing in 2020 as we think about getting a full count here in Los Angeles. And so before I pass it over to Dorothea, I wanted to first give you some context for the census, especially thinking about why the census is important, what impact it could have on Los Angeles if we do get an undercount, and then what we're doing locally to ensure that we get a full and accurate count. So the census itself is important for a lot of different reasons. Primarily, the census is used by data folks, advocacy groups, to obtain information on the nation's landscape, right? We want to better understand who our population is, what are their characteristics, and in that way, we're able to paint a picture of this country. The census, however, is also used for two other critical functions for our government. One is for political representation. It really is a fundamental part of how power is distributed in this country. It determines, it is used for reapportionment and redistricting. In the House of Representatives, there are 453 of congressional seats, and the census helps to determine how those seats are distributed in the country. So in a place like California, where we have about 10 million residents, that constitutes about 53 congressional seats in the House of Representatives. So that is again determined just on our population count, and that's done through the census. The census is also used to determine and distribute our federal funds. The country distributes approximately 600, and I think the latest figure is closer to $700 billion on an annual basis to every single jurisdiction in the country, local, state, and tribal governments. And the state of California alone receives $76 billion annually for things like schools, transportation, education, housing, healthcare. So when you're talking about the census, you're really talking about power and money at the end of the day. In the County of Los Angeles, those funds are come up to about $7 billion for the top federally funded programs. So there's about $5 billion that the county receives from 4 federal programs, and that's matched by $2 billion from the state. And again, those funds go to things like transportation, job training, child welfare programs, Section 8 housing, Medicaid, and older adults programs. So the County of Los Angeles itself is heavily impacted by an accurate census because, again, the amount of federal funds that the county receives is significant. And politically, though, the census also is very important. After the 2010 census, the state of California failed to gain an additional congressional seat in the House of Representatives, and that's the first time that that's happened since the state incorporated in 1850. And we lost that opportunity by about 13,000 individuals. When you think about what 13,000 individuals is, that's about one of the smallest cities in LA County, the city of Cudahy, or the city of Commerce. If those of you who are living within the city of Los Angeles, it's half the population of the neighborhood of Venice. So 13,000 individuals is not a lot, okay? And for us in California, getting our fair share of representation in our nation's capital is significantly important. And then how that translates in terms of LA County, there's 19 of the 53 seats that we hold in the U.S. House of Representatives are held here in Los Angeles County. So the county itself comprises about a third of our representation up in Washington, D.C. So again, political representation and federal funds are significantly important to ensure that not only California, but the County of Los Angeles and the City of Los Angeles continue to receive their fair share of funds, but also of political representation. Now, there's several things that are happening with the decennial census that are making this upcoming census particularly unique and presenting new challenges that we have not had before. Primarily because the census is being modernized, which is a great thing. It is going online for the first time in its history. So households will be receiving the survey, a notification via mail letting them know that they can fill out the survey online. Okay, so that presents significant opportunities, but it also presents significant challenges because when you think about the digital divide and how not every person in this country has the same access to the internet or digital technology, that asking someone to participate on an online survey can present a barrier for some folks. So the census, though, has also been chronically underfunded since the beginning of the planning cycle, which happened shortly after 2010. They began planning for 2020 and 2011. And so since then, the Census Bureau has been working on a budget that has been significantly below what they have typically been allocated. So that chronic underfunding has led the Census Bureau to try and come up with new and innovative approaches to create cost savings. And one of those solutions is placing the survey online. Now, they're also having to reduce the number of field enumerators that are out on the ground knocking on doors and collecting information. For those of you who have participated in a census before, you may remember that if you hadn't filled in your survey and sent it back to the Census Bureau, somebody from the Census Bureau might have knocked on your door and asked you questions about the folks living in your household. And so that contact, that person-to-person contact, is being reduced significantly. We hear by up to 50% less field enumerators that are going to be out in the field collecting information. There's also other challenges that are happening currently just through the climate that we currently find ourselves in under the new administration. And so there's, specifically attacks on immigrants and other vulnerable communities that have created this sense of fear and anxiety amongst immigrants or mixed status households that have hesitations about providing a government their information on where they can be found. And so that particular challenge places a heavy burden on local governments, on local community advocates to ensure full count, because of course trying to convince somebody to make sure that they fully participate in the census and see the benefits of full participation is a challenge that we need to find a solution to. There's also, in terms of the Census Bureau, lack of leadership. The Bureau itself has been without a director since the middle of last year and continues to be leaderless. So there's a ship that is moving full steam ahead with no captain at the forefront giving it direction. And then finally, because of these challenges, because it's going online, because there are going to be less field enumerators out in the field knocking on doors, because of these federal policies, and because of there's a lack of leadership at the Bureau itself, the Government Accountability Office in Washington, D.C. has placed the 2020 census on its list of high-risk projects. And that's something that is very significant. Not very many government programs get on the GAO's list of high-risk projects. So to end up on that list means that there are significant challenges that the Bureau needs to address before implementation of their operations in 2020. So Los Angeles itself is unlike any other jurisdiction in the country because we are the hardest to count county in the nation. That is a title that we are not particularly proud of here in Los Angeles. But again, it's something that makes us unique, and one of the reasons why Los Angeles is the hardest to count county in the nation is because of our geographic and demographic diversity. The city of Los Angeles has about 3.2 million housing units, and we have large swaths of populations that are considered hard to count. Those are racial and ethnic minorities. We have a lot of people who live in rental housing units and move around a lot, making them hard to track. We have a significant number of our residents that are limited English proficient. Language barriers are going to be a key issue to solve when you think about how you communicate the instructions to filling out the survey to somebody who speaks or reads English as a second language or may not speak English at all. We also have people living in poverty in the city of Los Angeles. About 16.3% of our population lives below the poverty level. And again, immigrants, our immigrant community in Los Angeles is about immigrants comprise 1.5 million people in the city of Los Angeles, and about 375,000 of those are undocumented. Now, a few weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, the Census Bureau announced that they were going to add a citizenship question to the decennial census. So when you think about our 375,000 undocumented immigrants or the 1.5 million immigrants that we have here in the city of Los Angeles, getting them to participate in the census is critical. If, for instance, there was a study done by Andrew Reamer at George Washington University, and he estimates that California per person receives $1,950 a year based on the census count. Now, if you think about what that could mean if all of our immigrant population in the city of Los Angeles, those 1.5 million people that live here and are not citizens, if they don't participate in the census, that could mean up to $3 billion a year for the city of Los Angeles in terms of lost revenue. And again, that's for programs that we use to provide services to that same population, whether it's for healthcare, education, transportation, housing. So again, these populations are considered hard to count populations in the city and county of Los Angeles, and what presents a particular challenge in terms of thinking about how we get a full count. So now giving you a background on what the challenges are facing us here in Los Angeles moving forward to 2020. We in the mayor's office have been from the beginning working with the County of Los Angeles to ensure a full count region-wide, county-wide. And we believe that by engaging in a county-wide outreach effort, that's going to get us closer to getting a full count locally. So I'm going to bring up a great colleague and partner of mine, Dorothea Park, who is going to talk to you about what programs and strategies we are putting together to do outreach and education for our local residents.
Good morning, everyone. My name again is Dorothea Park. I'm with LA County Chief Executive Office, and I want to thank you all for being here and for our partners on the virtual world joining us as well. So in terms of the program, I'm going to launch right in. As mentioned, we work hand in hand, the county and other government agencies and stakeholders. So one factor that's very unique about LA County is we have 88 cities. And we have 140 unincorporated areas. So that's enormous amount of municipalities that we need to coordinate with. So we want to avoid duplication of efforts when we do outreach. And we need to coordinate, of course, with municipalities and stakeholders to do that. We are using a data-driven approach to maximize our limited resources and to be able to cover the geography of Los Angeles County. So we have some pillars that we have developed and stood by from the outset. And one of them is developing a countywide communications and marketing plan. And we're looking at both on the air media as well as on the ground face-to-face targeting community block group areas. We also have a joint complete count committee, the city as well as the county, and we'll get into the organization of that in a bit here. We have a regional mapping tool that tells us the low response score areas throughout the county so that we can begin planning around those areas. And two goals that we're hoping to achieve is create census action kiosks. So in the past, the federal government funded questionnaire assistance centers. One of the pieces of news that we just learned several weeks ago is they are not going to move forward with that concept, which makes our census action kiosks all the more important. We have communities that do not have broadband, that do not have internet access. Many of them have phones, but downloading and completing the questionnaire on a phone can be cumbersome and problematic. And we're concerned that residents will just basically abandon the questionnaire if they see they're having problems doing it on their phone. And so we are going to set up these kiosks where they'll be able to come in and not only ask questions, but also complete the questionnaire. And the last thing we are trying to organize are Census Goodwill Ambassadors, which are basically looking at our departments that have volunteers in all sorts of areas and encouraging them as well as students in higher education to join us in getting out the word and encouraging people to complete the questionnaire. So our Complete Count Committee framework is organized with 3 Complete Count committees. The one I just mentioned was County Outreach, and that group, each group has a stakeholder group, and in our case it's a community table with the Advancement Project and other community-based organizations and faith-based organizations. We have a government, quasi-government subcommittee, and as you can see, that's broken down into several areas. The Municipal Count Committee, which is, represents our 88 cities, Higher Education, which represents our universities, colleges, and community colleges throughout the county, unions, both county and city, as well as business and chambers. Our next group is county and city departments. The County of Los Angeles has over 100,000 employees. Many of them come into face-to-face contact with our clients and constituents and can be very helpful in terms of messaging. Plus, we want them to complete the questionnaire as well. And then our last group is going to focus on creating and establishing the census action kiosks. We have two other subcommittees, and they're really driven by the fact, as was mentioned earlier by Maria, our funding sources. So the county government, as she mentioned, receives $5 billion in federal funds and $2 billion state matching funds as of 15-16. We're currently updating those numbers, and they are going to be going up. And basically, those are in the areas primarily of health and human services or social services and transportation. And so they too have similar subcommittees where they'll be organizing their stakeholder groups, their government agencies that they interact with, as well as the city and county departments. So the phase that we are in right now, we have is called the local update of census addresses. And this is critical. This is us trying to capture every address. So this U.S. Census Bureau sends us a file to all of our cities and county government. And for the first time ever, all 88 cities did register, and they either will have the county, in 42 cities, the county will be the primary lead, and the cities will then review the data, and then the other cities are handling their own master address file. This is very critical in that we have many constituents that do not live in standard addresses. They live in trailers, they live in basements, they live in converted garages. And we need to try and find ways to identify those locations, or they will not get a postcard or letter from the Census Bureau asking them to complete the questionnaire, and we will miss them. And so this is probably the one baseline area that government has a real should have a real handle on and work heavily towards making certain every address is accounted for. So right now we're in the planning phase, which is why we've asked you to join us. We are planning and collaborating with all partners to make certain that we can launch the most successful 2020 census campaign as possible, given some of the obstacles and challenges that were mentioned earlier by Maria. And then by spring of 2019, we will begin our implementation, educating people, training our Census Goodwill ambassadors and other stakeholders, and creating a motivating and active environment. And then the last phase, of course, is April 1st, 2020 is the launch date for the 2020 census, and they will do enumerating, and throughout that period into the end of the fiscal year and wrapping up around August. The census data is due to the president by the end of the year, and then in 2021 they launch redistricting based on that data. So I mentioned to you earlier that LA County developed a low response score mapping tool. And up there is the address that you can access that will highlight for you and basically scores our highest areas of low response. And they're in red, and then the next level is orange, and the level before that is gold. So you'll see the different levels in that mapping tool. And so how was this mapping tool developed? The U.S. Census Bureau initially looked at over 300 factors to determine what are the characteristics of this country that we should be aware of. And through that, they selected the 16 socioeconomic and demographic characteristics that are highly correlated to hard-to-survey populations. And they are listed there before you. It's household income, non-Hispanic Black, non-Hispanic White, Hispanic, Asian, Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander, American Indian, or Alaska Native, below poverty level, not high school graduate, renters, vacant housing units, limited English, age 14, and above population ages, the younger populations of 18 to 24, older populations over 65, and then family occupied units with related children under age 8 and multi-unit housing. Not as clear within this, but a very big target group is our university and college campuses. They are all of at the highest end of low response throughout the nation, and certainly within Los Angeles County, which has many, many public and private colleges and universities. They tend to be renters. A part of it, there could be all sorts of factors that are leading to it. The census is in April. Some campuses are on spring break. Some students probably think their parents are adding them to their file. There's all sorts of unknown reasons, but we really need to quantify that population because they're completely missing in the census count. So here is a list of the 10 hardest to survey cities listed in order, and what isn't mentioned here is actually the second hardest area to count are the unincorporated areas. So I will give you a few examples of unincorporated areas. East Los Angeles is unincorporated. Hacienda Heights, Roland Heights, Altadena. Those are all examples of unincorporated areas. They are not within the municipal boundaries of any city. So they are the second largest group of low response block groups. And then like Long Beach, Compton, Huntington Park, and so forth. LA being, of course, the largest. And I guess I'm giving you our contact information if you need that. I'm going to turn this back over to you, to Maria. Okay.
Thank you, Dorothea. And that kind of gives you a background on the census, why it's important, and what we're doing here locally to ensure an accurate count. This is our contact information, so if you want to remain in contact with us afterwards, you are free to do so. And now we want to talk about how we can all work together to ensure a full census count in Los Angeles. And so we're going to be focusing our challenge on creative solutions, technological or otherwise, that we can design together to make the 2020 survey more accessible and engaging, especially for those that will be hard to survey, including immigrants, racial and ethnic minorities, children 0 to 5 years of age, renters, college students, individuals with limited English proficiency, and people living in poverty. Now, just a quick note on what we mean by accessible or accessibility. In this context, accessibility means mobile apps, outreach toolkits, easy to understand informational material and or multilingual translated material, easy to navigate website or digital tools like apps. Just to give you a better understanding of also what we mean by accessibility before I show you an example of a tool that was developed in Australia. We were talking before the start of this program about what access to the census could mean for hard to count populations, and we were talking about senior citizen who, as part of a church meeting, talked about how she was excited that the survey was going online, and she was excited to fill out the survey online, and she happened to be a senior, which is great to hear, right? Because our concern was that, seniors are likely not going to be the ones that are going to have the easiest access to the survey. And then in thinking about that individual who knows how to use the internet, knows how to use digital tools, and comparing that to my own personal experience with my parents. who still use flip phones. They don't check their voicemail because they don't know how. They don't have computers at home. They don't access the internet at all. And in fact, if they do have a question about anything that has to do with the internet, they ask myself or my sister to do it for them. My parents are immigrants, and so the accessibility of the survey itself is going to be a different experience, right, for seniors, and it really is a spectrum. You'll have individuals like the senior in church who talked about how she was excited to fill out the survey online, to people like my parents who don't use the internet or the computer as part of their daily lives and require somebody to help them navigate that sector. So as you think about accessibility and think about what solutions we might have or create to create that accessibility to people like my parents, or enhance accessibility to people who may have some understanding of the internet and some understanding of technology, how we can make it easier and simpler for them to participate in the survey is part of today's challenge. And so I wanted to show a video that was developed in Australia for their census, and just to demonstrate, when we talk about accessibility and how do we incorporate digital tools. This is one digital tool that Australia used to educate people on their census.
August 9 is Census Night. It's a moment for every one of us to pause and play a role in shaping the future of Australia. But what is the census and how does it work? Well, it's officially called the Census of Population and Housing. And it's all about getting a detailed snapshot of every person and household in Australia on one night. The whole household, please. Thank you. It's the Australian Bureau of Statistics' biggest and most important collection of data, because what we learn in the census can benefit everybody. It helps when planning things like roads, parks, hospitals, schools, transport, and infrastructure. So it's really important that everyone participates. Get online on August 9. It's our moment to pause and make a difference. Visit the Census website anytime for more information.
And so that's just an example of a digital tool. Obviously, there are many ways to engage people in education about the importance of the census. It could be a video, it could be an app, it could be a survey, it could be translated informational material that breaks down complicated ideas into very simple concepts. And to talk with you more about what that could mean for today's challenge, I'd like to invite up Jean Holm from the Information and Technology Agency with the City of Los Angeles to talk about digital tools.
Hi, everybody. Who's been to a hackathon before? Whoa, okay, about half the room. So a hackathon, and how many of you are technologists? About the same number of people. One more. So if you don't know anything about technology, it's awesome that you're here. So there's not going to be any difference to sort of like the skills or your ability to win if you do or don't know technology. But I'm going to give you some really quick crash tools and show you that technology is not that difficult. So the most important thing to remember is exactly what you heard, the fact that we're trying to get everybody in Los Angeles to be counted. Everybody matters. We want to make sure that every person, whether somebody's sleeping on the street whether it's somebody in a household, whether it's an immigrant, whether it's elderly or youth, whether it's LGBTQ. We want to make sure that our whole community is counted in a way that actually lifts up the voice of Los Angeles and lifts up the voices of cities all over the country. So I'm going to give you a few quick tools that you can use without a single line of code. So if you're a coder and you're a technologist and you want to do whatever you want to do, that's great. But for those people particularly who don't know tech, I'm just going to walk you through a few things. So one of the ideas is about creating a beautiful website. So there's a lot of different tools out there that are free. One of the ones that I like is called Wix, W-I-X. And literally in 5 minutes, literally, you can create a website. Wix lets you create a website by just simply logging in and saying the kind of business you have. Are we connected online? Great. Let me just go with a live demonstration, and we'll see how risky that is. Okay, so Wix.com, and there's others. There's Foursquare, there's Squarespace. And what Wix does is it lets you, again, without understanding what you want to do, understanding the technology, be able to start a new site. So I'm going to just log in here. It's free. Anybody can join. And there's a plus sign up here. So I start with the plus sign. And then it asks me what kind of website. Okay, so you guys have to call me out if I actually use code, okay? So the website, I'm going to say a business, even though I'm working on the census. And I'm not going to come over to this editor because I'm not a technologist. I am, but I'm not today. And so I want to just start now into, and it gives me this editor. So I want to start a community business because I want to get my community, I live in the San Gabriel Valley, I want to get my community to be able to answer the census. So I'm going to go ahead and start a site here. I just start typing in community, and I can get all these different kinds of community sites. I go to community center, and I go over here on the side to next. And now it's going to ask me what I want to do. Well, I might want to actually be helping people fill out their census. So I might try to take bookings and appointments. I might want to get subscribers, and I might want to talk about like a blog, the kinds of things that I'm doing. And I'm going to call it Count Me in LA. And my business is here. I'm going to be at City Hall. I'm sure the mayor will give me space, right, ladies? Yeah, okay, all right. And so it's going to, if I had like an online social presence already, you could link it into this, but I'm just going to skip this step really quick. And it's going to start to think about what I want to do. Now, if I have a logo, I can add it. Or I can just move on. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and start. Have I used any code yet? No, okay. I'm a UCLA Bruin. So I'm going to choose blue and gold for my site colors. And then part of this is really thinking about, as you create any of these tools, is to say, who's my audience? So am I trying to reach people in my neighborhood? Am I trying to reach people in one of the demographics we're talking about? What is it I want them to do? Right, so audience and purpose. My purpose is I want them to fill out the census, right? And I want them to get their friends to fill out the census. So that's the kind of content I have to think about on the site. But what you don't have to think about is sort of all the technology and how it looks and how do I create a website and how do I push it forward. And so, magically, while I was talking to you, a website shows up. And so this website is called, literally I had no idea how this was going to look. So this just picks pictures that it thinks are representative of the kinds of sites that I talked about. And then I can come down. It's got different kinds of pictures. Here's that 0 to 5 age children. This worked out really well. There's some of our folks working in our parks programs. So it creates all of these things. And I can go in and edit it later, just like I would a Word document almost. But it lets all this site get built automatically. And so don't feel afraid to jump right in and try something a little different today. as you're sort of creating these sites. The other thing you can do is you can create a mobile app. Sorry, let me get back to the full screen here. So how many people have created a mobile app before? Great, one brave person. Okay, so I bet that in 60 seconds I can teach you guys how to create a mobile app. I have a bet? Okay. So there's this really cool, there's a lot of great mobile app development kits out there. Fluid UI is really good. But for people who really have never created a mobile app before, there's one called MockMe, MOKK.me, MockMe. So this doesn't really create a mobile app, but it's like what you might want to present at judging today of this is what my mobile app might look like. So, so here's MockMe. All right, so you just kind of pull up over the information you want. So this is called Count Me In. That's the name of my app. I'm going to put a headline in here that lets me say it's time to be counted, right? So I'm literally dragging and dropping. I want to have some buttons on my app, so I'm just pulling this over and then just typing over the words with whatever I want. So I might want to say, I need help to fill this out. I might want to tell people I did it, I filled out the census, yay, like the I voted stickers. I might want to share with my friends, not what I answered, but maybe that I answered. And then I also might want to be able to show my mobile app like where people can get help, or a location where there's computer centers like the library, and then you can drop in a map. So that was it. That was like real time, how fast it is, 60 seconds. Oh, it's 51 seconds actually. So you can drag and drop things over and be able to create something that looks just like a mobile app. So again, you don't have to create a full prototype of a product today, but if you want to kind of give people a sense of where you're headed, you could do that. And so if you want to go further, there's one called AppyPie, A-P-P-Y-P-I-E, that again is just kind of like that Wix site. It's really easy to sort of walk through and be able to create a prototype. And then finally, part of what we're doing today is telling stories, right? So we want to tell the story about why is it important for different people to actually create, to come and fill out the census. And so what we want to do is to be able to tell that story sometimes in ways that are really interesting. So infographics are a great way of doing that. There's a site called Pick2Chart, like pictures, but Picktochart.com, Pick2Chart. And Pick2Chart will help you to create an infographic. All of these are really easy to use tools. They're all free today. I'll be here all day to help you if you want to kind of work with any of them. And on Pick2Chart, you can also start pulling in some of that data that we talked about. So the data that you can get from a variety of sites and the resources that we've posted, or you can put that in like a small spreadsheet and be able to show different kinds of visualizations of that data. So how do you win today? Did you know it's a competition? Okay. So first of all, we all win for being here today. And the most important thing is that 4 million people will better win because the work you do today will be informative and transformational and helping to make them get counted. So today we're going to form teams. So for those of you online, grab your team if you've got your posse together, or be able to find people online. If you're looking for help, you can get on our Census 2020 Slack channel on Twitter at hashtag Census 2020 Hackathon. Or jump on to the YouTube channel where you're seeing this live stream, and there will be help to get you connected to others on your team. If you're here today at the LA Public Library, then we want to make sure that you get together a team that has some diverse skills. So it's okay if you came as a team, but if you're looking for somebody to join in or you want to get matched up, just see one of the organizers and we'll help you get into a team. Think about the data. So I know it's tempting to just like rush right in to say, I'm going to get Miley Cyrus to come and advocate for filling out the census, and it's an advertising campaign, but think about the data too. Like, what demographic is Miley going to appeal to? And she does a ton, so she does a ton of work with the homeless here in Los Angeles, actually, and with my friend space. So She's really influential in that community. But, you know, who is it that we're trying to get to come in? What is the data telling us to do? How do we want to make sure that we're using that data in ways that help to better inform the policy from the mayor's office, the decisions we make, where we invest our dollars, how we make sure that those stations are in the right demographics? Identify your audience, sketch out a solution. So before it gets too late in the day, start to kind of literally sketch out what you're thinking of. Like it's an app, or it's an advertising campaign, or it's like the video that we saw from Australia, or I think a policy needs to change at the city. Whatever idea you have, and we're hoping it's going to be pretty wild and crazy, that those ideas, start to sketch them out with your team, and then integrate the data. So bring the data back into the conversation. And again, think about how the thing you're doing is going to inform and get the outcomes we want. Build a prototype or a presentation or a concept, or come up and sing a song, or do a skit, or present it in any way that you want to. And then the other thing is what's going to happen afterwards. So maybe the way to sustain it is you're going to build it and actually make it happen. Maybe you're going to look to us to help you connect today to an organization like the Brotherhood Crusade or the United Way that can help to make it happen and sustain it. Or maybe you're talking about passing it back to the city. Well, there's a bunch of city folks here and county folks here today. So think about how it's going to be more than just an experiment for today. So at the end of the time, we're going to judge you on 4 different criteria. So one is, most importantly, will this help improve the census count? Is it going to motivate people in some way? Is it going to engage them? Is it going to make them aware that the census is important? Is it going to help build trust in the process? Whatever piece you're looking for. But how can it improve the census? How creative is it? So seriously, like, get up and be wild and kind of crazy with your ideas. Use data in some way. So you saw bunches of data today. There's data on the City of LA open data site. There's data at the federal level at data.gov. There's data at the county. And then the 4th part is just think about how we would actually implement this. So like, what would we sustain it with? So that's the way to win today. I know you're all going to do amazing work.
Okay, so I think with that, we'll just go ahead and break out into groups. So if you guys want to start the conversation, we'll meet back, I think, well, it's almost 11, but if you are feeling for lunch, it'll be at noon or so, and you guys can be right out here as well. Do you have a question? Oh, yes. Let's see, we have same rules for virtual participants. Please use our Slack channels or the hashtags that were mentioned. And a list of resources also lives on the drive, the Google Drive that was shared with you, and the registration, so that you can, if you can't find them directly, everything there is listed and it's clickable, so the links are all part of that. We'll drop this presentation there as well, so that you have access to the presentation for those that maybe are joining us remotely as well and want that as a resource. So questions and answers. Yes.
Can you go over the actual, like, how a census is actually done? Like, when an enumerator actually meets someone, right? Like, what are the rules for that? For example, like, can a friend fill out a form, or does it have to be the actual person doing it? Or, like, what are things that you can and can't do?
Okay.
So we know, like, what we can build and can't build, or shouldn't build.
Perfect. And do you mind repeating the question?
Hi. So the census enumerator will come to somebody in the household. So they're hoping to interview whoever is in the household who can give them accurate information and make certain they capture everyone in that household. So it's usually, in many cases, if it's an immigrant family, it's the student, the college or high school student in the family who's very articulate and can enumerate all the information about the household. So that's basically who will answer it.
So can it be a little bit like hearsay? Can you ask one student, say there's like 50 people living there, or what's the actual, does the census person actually have to physically see each person?
No, they don't have to. They're relying on the person to provide them with that information.
But what are, like, if the data checks, I mean, can someone just say, how do you, like, validate and audit that the person's not just making stuff up?
The question is that the questions are pretty specific, because they're gonna ask the birth date, they're gonna ask, were they born in this country or outside the country? The questions become quite specific. So it's not, in the sense of the citizenship question, for instance, it's just not saying, are you a citizen or not? It goes on for about 5 or 6 questions, and I think we have some information on that as well that demonstrates that each question is fairly detailed, which is one of the reasons it's so difficult to answer on your phone, because it's not just asking you one thing, it then drops down into several layers of information that you have to add to it. That's not to say people couldn't respond incorrectly, but it weeds it down a little better.
So, and for the hard to count areas, like maybe homeless, how do you actually do that, or how do you make sure you don't double count or you don't skip people? What's the challenges there?
So the homeless count is done over a 3-day period, actually at the end of March, before the April 1st, 2020 Census Day. And they do 3 things at this point. This is what the Census Bureau will do. They'll do a count at the shelters, they'll do a count at the food banks, and then they'll do a street count. And one of the things that they're looking at now is trying to locate a lot of the locations that you now see probably throughout Los Angeles County, where there's tent communities. And they're going to probably have to wait till closer to the census to get an accurate picture of what those areas are, because people are mobile. But the Census Bureau will be doing that. And they also work with other foundations that work with the homeless to help identify those areas.
And what tools do the enumerators actually have? Do they have a laptop, or what they brought?
So yes, they are in a team of at least 2, but they do have they're supposed to have a mobile device. They tried to do it in 2010. They were unsuccessful in getting it done in time, but they're going to attempt to do it this time. So that's one of these challenges. Yes? Yes.
You said on 2020 census that can be done on the library. Is the census stickers will be physically on the library, or just like I will go into the library do by myself, because you said that will be going to the major slash, not a census sticker. So some people, some household may not actually visit by census sticker and just do it by my home. Is that the case?
Right. So everyone with an address will get a card with a 16-digit number to log in and do it electronically. But if that's not workable for them because they either don't have a computer or for whatever reason they don't feel comfortable answering at home, they can come into a library or a government facility. It could be a hospital. It could be anywhere that we set up these census action kiosks, and they can either fill out the census there, ask questions. We're going to be using Census Goodwill ambassadors to help us from the community-based organizations and potentially volunteers throughout the county and county employees and city employees. So am I answering your question?
Yes, no.
Okay, so
Still very close. Also, will be a follow-up question is because there's many trailer.
yes.
How are you going to how that don't have a physical address? So is that going to be the temporary? If I just walk in, I just want to do census and see this trailer. I'm going to. Yeah, what will be his policy? Because usually there's no policy.
Right, so they won't, if we don't, during this local update of census addresses that we're doing right now, we have a 120-day window to try and identify people that are living in non-standard homes, but if we miss them, then it is up to the enumerator, basically going door to door, to either catch that residence or the person themselves going into a census action kiosk and filling out the form, and then it does get validated through the U.S. Census Bureau. They're doing all address validation digitally, using digital records and administrative records. So that's how they're locating people.
So that means someone can be voluntary, just walk in, I just move in, I want to do it, and then if the system accepts it, I can do it.
Yes. Yeah, there's also, you can do it through the phone, through, just answer the questions through a phone option. Yes?
You guys mentioned that the data sources are on the Google Drive. Are there any
the LRS map? Is that on Google Drive?
We made every attempt to include all of the resources that we know are out there and available that are related, directly related to Census 2020, or could be beneficial for you to use today. So that there's, to our knowledge, no other. Yes.
Sure, sure.
Can you work on more than one solution, or is it one solution fits all? Because you mentioned there are different things.
Yes, they're different.
Yeah, you can work as many solutions as you want. There's a question.
Is there a set of questions that we need to answer to be counted? Because they was mentioning that there's a website that we can log in and get
Sample
counted by
test.
answering the questions.
Yeah, there's sample test questions that the U.S. Census Bureau has posted on their website, and we've also printed the census questions in today's agenda, so you know what questions are going to be included in the count. So there's 2 different locations that you can view our program, and then online. We also included like a Word document of those questions in the resource folder.
But there is an option where I can get counted by just being on the website, like in the census, in the actual census.
Once the census process starts. You're saying you can just go, so you're saying on Census Day, I can just go to a website. They'll give you a login where you can log in and you enter your 16-digit code, and then you can do it directly online.
How do you get that code?
It'll be mailed. It's a mail out.
Mail to that physical address.
Yes.
The Census Bureau has indicated that people will be able to enter their information without the use of that 16-digit code. So our understanding is, you know, they'll have the 16-digit code, and that's what is preferred for households to use to fill out the form. However, it's not going to be the only way to fill out the form online. So you're talking about in 2010, questions that were left unanswered? The census is still counted. The form is still counted. Those blank questions, if the government has, or if the Bureau has access to that information and can, by process of elimination, answer the question based on the data they already have access to, they'll impute that information for that household. But if they don't have that information, they'll leave it blank.
So can we give rewards to people, whether non-monetary rewards, or is that against the law, federal law?
You're talking about incentives for filling out a survey?
Just gamified behavior. I mean, what can you do, what can't you do?
Well, local government agencies are not allowed to provide incentives to the public for participating in a mandated questionnaire. But that doesn't mean that, you know, private philanthropic organizations or businesses can provide incentives or rewards for people to participate in the census. So as far as security and confidentiality of the census is protected under Title 13 of the U.S. Code. Title 13 prohibits any census taker or Census Bureau employee from sharing individual information to anybody outside of the Bureau, whether that's another government agency, outside organizations. So the household information, individual people's information is protected under Title 13. Because the survey is going to be online for the first time. The Bureau has been conducting up to 44 tests that they're still testing in 2018 and in preparation for 2020. So those tests revolve around security and confidentiality of the online survey. So they're currently testing it. Any other questions?
Is there a list of known challenges from the past that maybe could be, available to us? Like, maybe there was a survey done as to what some of the challenges were from the people's perspective or from the system perspective. Is there some kind of a list of challenges from the past that we could maybe try to?
I think what makes the 2020 census so unique is that it's being held online for the first time in its history. And so because the last decennial census was back in 2010 and it was via mail, that any lessons learned in terms of how best to reach people or get them to fill out the survey or any confidentiality or security questions just weren't around in 2010. And not to mention, the amount of technology that has developed and come forward between 2010 and now is just, it's vast, right? So, so I think, for thinking about it that way, there's very limited information that we can take from 2010.
Things that apply today as much as they applied in 2010, which would be a very partial list, but it would be like a good start, for example.
I don't know that we have any of that information as part of our resource folder.
Last one, because it's online, so there's no time limitation. So on the day from the 00 hour to 23, until the 00 hour, 24 hours can be done, right?
So April 1st, 2020 is Census Day, and people, though, will be able to fill out their census survey between the last week of March in 2020 all the way through the end of August 2020. So there's going to be an extensive period that the survey itself or the questionnaire will be online and people will have access to. So if they don't fill it out on April 1st, it just simply means that after April 1st, those households are more likely to get somebody to knock on their door rather than just having them fill it out online. Thank you.